And now, in the stillness of this moment, we bring you the final thrilling chapter.
Welcome to Twilight Howl, where shadows stir and darkness whispers. Every tale beats with life. Can you feel its pulse? Will you dare to listen? Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, remember, the night has many voices. Sleep, if you can. We having fun now. Basements are supposed to be places we store old things, forgotten memories, or unused furniture. But sometimes, they hide more than just clutter. Sometimes, basements conceal secrets, dark, terrifying secrets that refuse to stay hidden. The stories you're about to hear are about ordinary people, like you, who thought their basements were just another room in their house. That is, until something strange happened. Something they couldn't explain. Something that made them question what might be lurking down there in the dark, just beyond their reach. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and remember, if you hear any strange sounds coming from below your house tonight, you might not want to check what it is. When I was a kid, our house had one of those old, unfinished basements. It wasn't like the typical scary basements you see in horror movies, but something about it always made me uneasy. Maybe it was the dim lighting, or maybe it was the way the walls were covered in cobwebs. Either way, I never liked going down there alone. One summer evening, when I was around 8, my mom asked me to grab something from the basement. We kept all sorts of stuff down there: holiday decorations, old toys, tools. I didn't want to go down, but I also didn't want to argue with my mom, so I reluctantly agreed. The basement door creaked as I opened it, and I winced at the sound. Slowly, I descended the stairs. The light at the bottom was one of those bulbs with a string you had to pull, so the first few steps were taken in near darkness. As I reached the final step, I yanked the string, and the dim bulb flickered to life. The basement was just as creepy as I remembered. Silent, still, with a faint musty smell that never quite went away. I quickly found the box I needed and started to head back upstairs when something caught my eye. There, in the far corner of the basement, was a small figure sitting on the floor. My breath hitched. At first I thought it was one of my old toys, but then it moved, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. I froze. It looked like a little boy, hunched over, wearing dirty, tattered clothes. His back was to me, and his head was down as if he was playing with something on the floor. My first instinct was to scream, but something in me just didn't. Instead, I asked, "Who are you?" The boy didn't respond. I felt a wave of dread wash over me, but I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. Then, the boy slowly turned his head. My heart nearly stopped when I saw his face, or rather, what was missing. He didn't have eyes. Just two dark, hollow sockets where his eyes should have been. He didn't say a word, but in my mind I heard a voice, soft and eerie. "I lived here before you." That was it. I dropped the box and ran up the stairs as fast as my legs would carry me, slamming the door behind me. I told my mom what I'd seen, but she brushed it off, saying it was just my imagination. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just my imagination. But to this day, I still hear that voice in my dreams. Our house was at the edge of a small forest. My bedroom window faced the trees, and at night, the wind would often rustle the leaves, creating a soothing background noise that helped me sleep. But one night, the wind was still, and I woke up to a different sound, a faint knock coming from downstairs. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. It was around midnight, and I was groggy. But the knock came again, this time a little louder. I got out of bed and crept downstairs, trying not to wake anyone else. I checked the front door, but there was no one there. Thinking maybe it was the wind or some animal outside, I went back to bed. But as soon as I laid down, the knocking resumed. This time, it was sharper, more insistent. I got up again, feeling a little more unnerved. I went to the front door, but once again, no one was there. I even checked the windows, but everything seemed normal. I was about to head back to bed when I heard something that made my blood run cold. A soft giggle. It wasn't coming from inside the house, but from outside, near the edge of the forest. I looked out the window, but couldn't see much beyond the dark shapes of trees. Then, just at the edge of the forest, I saw a small figure. It looked like a child, but I couldn't make out the details. The figure stood still for a moment, then turned and disappeared into the trees. My heart was pounding. I shut the blinds and hurried back to bed, pulling the covers over my head like I used to when I was a kid. The next morning I checked outside, but there were no signs of anyone near the house. No footprints, nothing. But later that day, I noticed something odd. On the front door, there were faint handprints, small ones like those of a child. I never figured out who or what had been knocking that night. And ever since then, I've made sure to double lock all the doors before going to bed. During my college years, I lived with 3 other roommates in a small, old apartment near campus. The place was cheap, and it definitely had its quirks: creaky floors, doors that didn't close all the way, and a kitchen that always seemed a little too cold, no matter how high we turned up the heat. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m., thirsty. I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, but as I entered, I froze. There was a man standing by the stove, facing away from me. He was dressed in an old tattered suit, like something out of a black and white movie. His hair was messy, and he seemed to be muttering something under his breath, though I couldn't make out the words. At first I thought it was one of my roommates playing a prank, but then I realized I didn't know this man. My heart raced. I stood there, unsure of what to do. Then very slowly the man turned to face me. His face. No, it wasn't a face at all. It was just a black void where his features should have been. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just darkness. I dropped my glass. The sound of shattering echoing in the kitchen. The man didn't react. He just stood there, staring at me with his featureless face. I bolted out of the kitchen and ran back to my room, slamming the door behind me. I stayed there, under the covers, until the morning light finally crept through the blinds. When I told my roommates, none of them believed me. They laughed it off, said I was probably half asleep or had a nightmare, but I know what I saw. After that night, I made sure to never go into the kitchen alone after dark. When I moved into my new apartment, I was excited to have my own space. The place wasn't huge, but it was cozy, and the rent was affordable. My bedroom had a large closet, which was perfect for storing all my clothes and junk. But almost immediately I started noticing something strange about that closet. Every night, when I lay in bed, I'd hear a faint whispering coming from the closet. At first I thought it was the neighbors, or maybe the pipes in the walls, but the whispers were too clear, too deliberate. They seemed to be coming directly from the closet itself. One night, after hearing the whispers for what felt like the 100th time, I decided to check it out. I opened the closet door, but there was nothing there, just my clothes and some boxes. I felt a little silly standing there in the middle of the night, listening to what was probably just my imagination. But as I turned to close the door, I heard it again. A whisper, right by my ear.
Don't look.
My heart stopped. I slammed the closet door shut and backed away, my hands shaking. I tried to sleep, but but every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could still hear the whispering. I've since moved out of that apartment, but I still think about that closet sometimes. And when I do, I hear those two words as clear as ever.
Don't look.
The house I grew up in had a large backyard with a row of trees that bordered the property. My bedroom had a window that looked out onto the yard, and as a kid, I always liked watching the trees sway in the wind. But one night, when I was around 12, something happened that made me never want to look out that window again. It was late, probably past midnight, and I was having trouble sleeping. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, when I suddenly had this strange feeling that I was being watched. I glanced toward the window and my blood ran cold. There was a face, pale, gaunt, with dark, sunken eyes, pressed against the glass, staring right at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just lay there. Component placement paralyzed with fear as the face slowly shifted, like it was trying to get a better look at me. The worst part was, I was on the second floor. There was no way anyone should have been able to be standing outside my window. After what felt like an eternity, the face finally disappeared. I don't know how, but I mustered the strength to get out of bed and run to my parents' room. I told them what I'd seen, but when they checked the yard, there was no one there. For the rest of the time I lived in that house, I never opened my blinds at night. Even now, as an adult, I still can't shake the feeling that somewhere, out there, that face is still watching me. When I was younger, we lived in a house that had an attic. It was small and cramped, and we didn't use it for much other than storing old furniture and boxes of stuff we didn't need. The entrance to the attic was a simple trap door in the ceiling of the hallway, with a pull-down ladder that creaked every time it was used. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was my parents moving around downstairs, but as I listened more closely, I realized the footsteps weren't coming from below. They were coming from above. It sounded like someone was walking around in the attic, pacing back and forth. I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, or maybe an animal had somehow gotten inside. But the footsteps were too heavy, too deliberate. I was too scared to go check, so I stayed in bed, pulling the covers up to my chin and praying that the sounds would stop. Eventually they did, and I fell back asleep, though I didn't feel rested in the morning. The next night, the footsteps came again, louder this time. I told my dad, and he checked the attic the following day, but found nothing. No signs of animals, no loose boards, nothing that could have made the noises I'd heard. Over the years, I kept hearing those footsteps, always at night, always above me. I tried to ignore them, but they never really stopped. Even now, thinking back on it, I still get chills. I don't know who or what was up there in that attic, but I'm just glad I never went up to find out.
And so, dear listeners, our time together comes to an end, but the stories, they never truly fade. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart steady, for the unknown awaits. This has been Twilight Howl. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and have a great day. See you next time.